This is a homily for the 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. The Gospel for this Sunday comes from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 14, verses 25 to 33. To download the text of this homily as a PDF file, go to sundayhomilies.au. Today's Gospel reminds us again that Jesus is on the way, and great crowds accompanied him. We have now passed the halfway point of the journey to Jerusalem. The Sunday lectionary devotes 19 weeks to this journey, and today's Gospel brings us to week 11. As Jesus approaches even closer to Jerusalem, the city of his destiny, we can sense a feeling of urgency. Today we again have some of the hard sayings of Jesus, sayings that are addressed to the great crowds accompanying him and not just to the disciples. Anyone who comes to me without hating father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Are we hearing that correctly? Did Jesus just say that we have to hate members of our own family, our father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters? That can't be right, surely, since the entire basis of his teaching is love. And moreover, the dictates of the Torah are clear. We read in the book of Deuteronomy, "Honor your father and your mother." The book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 12. The Greek verb miseo, translated here as hate, can also be translated as detest or abhor. It is the opposite of agapao, the verb to love. Let's go back to chapter 10, to the encounter between Jesus and the lawyer who asked him what he had to do to inherit eternal life. By way of response to that question, Jesus asked the lawyer what was written in the law. He replied, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbour as yourself." Jesus replied, "You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live." So in chapter 10, Jesus agrees that we must love God and our neighbour. Now in chapter 14, we're told that we must hate. We've faced a similar dilemma before. Let's go back to chapter 12, where Jesus says, "Do you suppose that I am here to bring peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division." He goes on to say, "From now on, a household of 5 will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. Father opposed to son, son to father, mother to daughter, daughter to mother, mother-in-law to daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law to mother-in-law." How does any of that square up to the announcement of the angels following the birth of Jesus? "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to people of good will." Peace in chapter 2, division in chapter 12. Peace and division, love and hatred. What's going on here? Let me respond to that question in a roundabout kind of way. The Oxford Dictionary defines religion as the belief in and/or worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially personal God or gods. Going by that definition, many people would claim that they are not religious. They do not believe in or worship such a superhuman being. It's interesting, though, to look at the etymology of our English word religion. The word comes to us from Latin. Religion is made up of the Latin prefix re, which means back, and the Latin verb ligare, which means to tie or bind. So etymologically, religion means to tie back, or perhaps a binding. Think of planting a sapling. We want it to grow tall and straight, so we place a stake alongside it and tie it back to the stake. By way of analogy, the stake represents our worldview, the story or meta-narrative that helps us understand why things are the way they are. The stake symbolizes the narrative that we use to make sense of the world around us. Everyone, therefore, is religious if we use the word in this more general sense. Obviously, some people have articulated their worldview, while for others it's something simmering away in the background, perhaps quite unconsciously. The 20th century theologian Paul Tillich defined religion in this way. Religion, in the largest and most basic sense of the word, is ultimate concern. What did he mean by ultimate concern? He describes it as passionate longing for ultimate reality. He believes that it is experienced as numinous or holy, distinct from all profane and ordinary realities. It is also experienced as overwhelming reality. In comparison, all other things appear empty and worthless. It demands our total surrender and promises total fulfillment. Our English word worship is usually associated with religion. The etymology of the word worship can be traced back to the Old English word weothskipe, which combines weoth, meaning worth or value, and skipe, meaning ship or condition. This suggests that worship originally referred to the act of giving worth or value to something. Over time, the word evolved and took on religious connotations, referring to the act of showing reverence or devotion to a deity or higher power. However, the word worship, in the more general sense, refers to whatever it is that I ascribe worth to. If I believe in a supreme being, then I ascribe ultimate worth to that being. In the Bible, idolatry is ascribing ultimate worth to anyone or anything but God alone. The great prayer of Judaism is known as the Shema. It is found in chapter 6 of the book of Deuteronomy. Hebrew is read from right to left, so we have Shema Yisrael. Now, here we have the sacred name of God, the Tetragrammaton, which is never pronounced. So in this prayer, devout Jews substitute the Hebrew word for Lord, Adonai. Then we have Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Note, the Lord is one. The word echad functions as the ordinary Hebrew word for one, but its reach is far wider than simple arithmetic. In the Shema, echad proclaims the exclusive, indivisible sovereignty of the covenant God. It affirms that there is one God, not many gods, and that we owe our ultimate allegiance to God alone. God is our sovereign Lord. So let's now bring these reflections on religion and worship together. Everyone is religious, consciously or otherwise, in the sense that we have a worldview that helps us make sense of the world around us. But a worldview that doesn't lead us to ultimate reality is of limited value. Ultimate reality demands total surrender, but a surrender that promises total fulfillment. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, God alone is ultimate reality. To worship anyone or anything but God, the ultimate reality, is idolatry. In language that may seem harsh to us, Jesus is talking about ultimate concern and ultimate allegiance. In comparison, all other things are empty and worthless. Therefore, the call to discipleship must take priority over every other relationship and commitment in our lives. But let's reflect for a moment on the language that Jesus uses. We have a number of idioms in English that are never interpreted literally. If I were to say, "It's raining cats and dogs," I'm talking about a torrential downpour. Not even the most credulous person would expect to see cats and dogs falling from the sky. "You're driving me up the wall" is a way of saying that I'm exasperated by your behaviour. And if I'm ravenously hungry, I might say, "I'm so hungry I could eat a horse." Again, no one would interpret what I've said literally. New Testament scholar Brendan Byrne tells us that Semitic languages by and large do not have a word for prefer. When a person prefers one thing over another, he or she is said to love one, the thing preferred, and hate the other. Hate then is simply an expression of rejecting something, possibly something quite good in itself, in favour of something considered more desirable. So the Semitic way of saying I prefer A to B would be I love A and hate B. This isn't an attempt to water down what Jesus is saying. Jesus is stating quite categorically that family allegiances, so strong in the Palestinian culture of his own day, have to take second place as far as following him is concerned. Our first priority is to follow Jesus wholeheartedly. Everything else, including family ties, comes after that. Jesus is making a call for absolute loyalty. Matthew's account of this saying of Jesus, found in chapter 10, verse 37, avoids using the Semitic idiom. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says, "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." New Testament scholar Tom Wright likens these words of Jesus to the leader of a great expedition forging a way through a high and dangerous mountain pass to bring urgent medical aid to villages cut off from the rest of the world. The way before them is treacherous, and so the leader prepares his team for the dangers ahead. "If you want to come any further, you'll have to leave your packs behind. From here on, the path is too steep to carry all that stuff. You probably won't find it again. And you'd better send your last postcards home. This is a dangerous route, and it's very likely that several of us won't make it back." So we come back to the theme of the cost of discipleship. Count the cost. Jesus gives us two examples to illustrate what he means, parables that have no parallel in the other Gospels. Which of you here, intending to build a tower, would not first sit down and work out the cost to see if he had enough to complete it? Otherwise, if he laid the foundation and then found himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers would all start making fun of him and saying, "Here is a man who started to build and was unable to finish." Or again, What king marching to war against another king would not first sit down and consider whether, with 10,000 men, he could stand up to the other who advanced against him with 20,000? If not, then while the other king was still a long way off, he would send envoys to sue for peace. In other words, count the cost. And what is the cost of discipleship? It is this: anyone who does not carry his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Note, by the way, that Jesus doesn't summon us to bear his cross. Rather, he talks about picking up our own crosses. The Greek has ton stauron eautou, literally the cross of him or herself. And earlier in the Gospel, in chapter 9, verse 23, Jesus added daily, kath hemeran, take up your cross every day. Cross-bearing requires deliberate sacrifice and exposure to risk and ridicule in order to follow Jesus. This commitment is not just to a way of life, it is a commitment to a person. And let's not forget how shocking this saying of Jesus would have been to his contemporaries. Over the past 2,000 years, we have become accustomed to the cross. It has even become a fashion accessory. However, historian Tom Holland reminds us of the horror of the cross. No death was more excruciating, more contemptible than crucifixion. To be hung naked, long in agony, swelling with ugly wheals on shoulders and chest, helpless to beat away the clamorous birds. Such a fate, Roman intellectuals agreed, was the worst imaginable. The cross has become a symbol of decision-making. We often say, I have come to the crossroads. I must decide which path I will follow. Let me remind you again what Dietrich Bonhoeffer had to say about cheap and costly grace, about making hard decisions at the crossroads. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ. Costly grace, he writes, is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a person will gladly go and sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price, to buy which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the call of Jesus Christ, at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. Costly grace is prepared to pay the price of discipleship. It is dearer than any other commitment or relationship in life, and may at times, sadly, lead to division. But it is the path to life. Such grace is costly, writes Bonhoeffer, because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it gives a person the only true life. Alan Culpepper offers this reflection. The cost of discipleship is paid in many different kinds of currency. For some persons, a redirection of time and energy is required. For others, a change in personal relationships, a change in vocation, or a commitment of financial resources. But for each person, the call to discipleship is all-consuming. A complete change in priorities is required of all would-be disciples. No part-time disciples are needed. No partial commitments are accepted. New Testament scholar Francis Maloney puts it this way: We are all in need of God and his reigning presence in our lives. It is the only thing that ultimately matters and makes sense of life, love, and death. The same cannot be said of father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, and our own life. It is a question of getting first things first. This indeed is to carry one's cross behind Jesus, who similarly had to respond totally to the call of his Father. What does that look like in practice? Here's an example of costly grace, of someone forced to make a hard decision at the crossroads. Eric Liddell was a Scottish athlete, rugby union international player, and a missionary. He participated in the 1924 Olympics held in Paris, but refused to run in the heats for his favourite event, the 100 metres sprint, because the heats were to be held on a Sunday. He came from a religious tradition that took seriously the commandment to keep holy the Sabbath day. The 1981 movie Chariots of Fire told his story. There's a memorable scene in the movie when Liddell is summoned to a meeting attended by the Duke of Sutherland, President of the British Olympic Committee, Lord Cadogan, Chairman of that committee, and Lord Birkenhead, a member of the committee. The Prince of Wales is also present. The Duke of Sutherland explains that they have invited him in for a little chat, to see if there's any way we can help resolve the situation. Lord Cadogan has no sympathy for the stand Liddell has taken. There's only one way to resolve the situation, and that's for this man to change his mind and run. The Prince of Wales is more tactful. Don't state the obvious, Cadogan. We're to explore ways in which we can help this young man to reach that decision. But Liddell is adamant. I'm afraid there are no ways, sir. I won't run on the Sabbath, and that's final. I intended to confirm this with Lord Birkenhead tonight, even before you call me up in front of this inquisition of yours. Cadogan interjects. Don't be impertinent, Liddell. But Liddell will not be intimidated. The impertinence, sir, lies with those who seek to influence a man to deny his beliefs. Birkenhead appeals to his sense of loyalty. On the contrary, Liddell, we're appealing to your beliefs in your country and your king, your loyalty to them. Hear, hear, says Cadogan. The Prince of Wales takes up the theme of loyalty. Mr. Liddell, you're a child of your race, as I am. We share a common heritage, a common bond, a common loyalty. There are times when we're asked to make sacrifices in the name of that loyalty. Without them, our allegiance is worthless. As I see it, for you, this is such a time. Standing at the crossroads, Liddell will not be deterred from taking the path that he knows to be right. Sir, God knows I love my country, but I can't make that sacrifice. Liddell remains faithful to his principles and doesn't race. However, he is able to run in the 400 metres, which was not held on the Sabbath. He won the gold medal, setting a world record. The choice that we are called upon to make at the crossroads is not always a simple and straightforward choice between good and evil. We might already be doing God's work, but we discern that God wants us to change direction. Consider the life of this young woman, Agnes Gonja Boijajiju, born in 1910 at Skopje, which was then part of the Ottoman Empire, Skopje is now the capital of North Macedonia. In 1928, at the age of 18, she left home to join the Sisters of Loreto. She was sent to their abbey in Rathfarnham, Ireland, to learn English. The following year, she began her novitiate at the Loreto convent in Darjeeling, in West Bengal, India. She took the religious name of Teresa after Saint Therese of Lisieux. Most of us know her as Mother Teresa, and she was canonized by Pope Francis on September the 4th, 2016. As a Loreto sister, she served as a teacher and principal at St. Mary's School in Kolkata for 18 years. But on September the 10th, 1946, she received what she called a call within a call. She was travelling on a train to Darjeeling, a hill station in the Himalayas. Just as she once stood at the crossroads as a young girl of 18 when she left her family and her homeland to begin life as a Loreto sister, now again at the age of 36, she stood at the crossroads. For the past 20 years, she had been a teacher, but God, she suddenly felt, wanted something more from her. In her own words, He wanted me to be poor with the poor and to love Him in the distressing disguise of the poorest of the poor. She once said, "The biggest disease in the world today is not leprosy or tuberculosis, but the feeling of being unwanted and uncared for. The greatest evil in the world is lack of love, the terrible indifference towards one's neighbour. What the poor need even more than food, clothes and shelter is to be wanted." And so Mother Teresa received permission to begin a new order, the Missionaries of Charity, committed to serving the poorest of the poor. Now, a temptation that might assail anyone called to serve the poorest of the poor is, what on earth could I do that will make the slightest bit of difference to the poor of India? The problems are far beyond the power of any one individual to fix. Mother Teresa's response? We ourselves feel that what we are doing is just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean would be less because of that missing drop. The two Teresas could not be more different. Therese of Lisieux was a contemplative nun, a Carmelite. She died from tuberculosis at the age of 24 on September the 30th, 1897. Very few people would have known of her, and her life seemed unremarkable, even to the nun she lived with. Just a few weeks before she died, one of her community made this observation: "She's a sweet little sister, but what will we be able to say about her after her death? She didn't do anything." The abbess of the community had asked Therese to write the story of her life, a kind of spiritual autobiography. It is a work that is now a spiritual classic, but it remained unread for several months after her death. The other nuns in the convent, including her own sister, obviously thought that there would be little worth reading in what she had written. By way of contrast, Mother Teresa was acclaimed as a living saint even while she lived. She had received the Nobel Peace Prize, feted by popes, princesses, and presidents. Saint Therese of Lisieux's call to holiness was through the very ordinary things of life. "In my little way," she wrote, "are only very ordinary things." So the call to holiness, the call to discipleship, the call to take up our cross and follow Jesus may, for a handful of people, involve doing great things for the Lord on the world stage. But for most of us, it is the call to follow Jesus amidst the very ordinary things of life. And there's one final lesson in discipleship that St. Teresa of Calcutta wants to teach us. Often when people begged to join her in the work she was doing among the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, she would respond gently but firmly, "Find your own Calcutta." As she explained, "Don't search for God in far lands. He is not there. He is close to you. He is with you. Just keep the lamp burning and you will always see him. Watch and pray. Keep kindling the lamp and you will see his love, and you will see how sweet is the Lord you love."